The blood hadn't even dried on the auction platform when they dragged her out. Commander Thaxon clicked his mandibles in disgust as he watched the Terran female struggle against her neural restraints. Her species designation flashed across his tactical display. Homo sapiens, Grade 7 threat level. The warning made him laugh. Grade 7. These soft-skinned primitives barely qualified as Grade 3 on their best day. Lot 47. The auctioneer's voice crackled through the arena's speakers, each word dripping with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for particularly worthless merchandise. One feral human female, approximately 22 standard cycles, unbroken, untrained, and absolutely useless for anything resembling civilized work. Thaxon's secondary eyes tracked the crowd's reaction. The usual suspects filled the viewing pods. Corvani slave traders with their perpetual sneers, a handful of Zelthran gladiator masters looking bored beyond measure, and the inevitable collection of perverts from a dozen different species. Nobody looked particularly interested. The human female, designation Delta 7 according to her shipping manifest, glared at the assembled crowd with eyes that burned like twin stars going supernova. Her auburn hair had been roughly sheared into jagged spikes, and purple bruises decorated her pale skin like some twisted form of war paint. The neural collar around her neck sparked occasionally, sending tremors through her frame that she stubbornly refused to acknowledge. Opening bid starts at 50 credits. The auctioneer tried to inject some life into his voice. 50 credits for this exotic specimen from the recently conquered Terra system. Silence stretched across the arena like a death shroud. Thaxon checked his chronometer and stifled a yawn. The morning's entertainment had been disappointingly predictable. 3 Eltarian pleasure slaves had gone for premium prices. A batch of Corvani miners had been snapped up by the industrial cartels, and even the brain-damaged Zelthran warrior had found a buyer. But this human. She might as well have been radioactive waste. 40 credits? Anyone? 30? The desperation in the auctioneer's voice was becoming embarrassing. She's got all her limbs, most of her teeth, reasonably young breeding stock. A Corvani trader in the front row made a disgusted noise that translated roughly to, "I wouldn't take her for free." His companions chittered their agreement. The human female's lips curled into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't looked so feral. Her gaze swept across the crowd, and Thaxon found himself oddly impressed by the pure, undiluted hatred radiating from those strange blue eyes. Most slaves learned submission within the first few cycles. This one looked like she'd rather bite through her own tongue than bow her head. 20 credits? The auctioneer's voice cracked like an adolescent going through molt phase. 15? She's got to be worth something to someone. That's when the human male stood up. Thaxon's head swiveled so fast his neck vertebrae popped. The figure rising from the back row was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing the kind of calm expression that made seasoned warriors nervous. The human's dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and his brown eyes held the steady patience of a predator watching prey. "I will take her," the human male said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent arena. "Full asking price." The auctioneer's jaw dropped so far Thaxon wondered if it might actually detach. "Sir, the current bid is 15 credits. The original asking price was 800. The human male, designation unknown, but clearly military based on his posture, reached into his jacket and withdrew a credit chip. He held it up where everyone could see it. 800 credits, he repeated, his tone as calm as a lake before a storm. Cash payment. No negotiation. Thaxon felt his combat instincts engage as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Humans weren't supposed to have that kind of money. Hell, humans weren't supposed to be free at all. The Terra system had been conquered less than 2 cycles ago, its population either dead, enslaved, or scattered to the outer rim. Yet here was one standing in the middle of the galaxy's premier slave market, throwing around credits like he owned the place. The female human on the platform had gone completely still. Her eyes locked onto the male with an expression Thaxon couldn't quite interpret. Recognition, disbelief, hope, whatever it was, it made his scales itch with unease. "Processing payment now," the auctioneer stammered, clearly as confused as everyone else. "Lot 47 sold to buyer designation." He squinted at his scanner. Captain Marcus Kane of the independent trader vessel Retribution. Captain Kane. Thaxton filed the name away for future reference. Independent traders were supposed to register with the Galactic Commerce Authority. A quick scan through his database showed no record of any vessel named Retribution, no registration for Marcus Kane, and no legitimate explanation for how a supposedly enslaved species had acquired enough credits to buy back one of their own. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed by the lack of drama, but Thaxton remained in his viewing pod, watching as guards deactivated the female's neural collar and handed her over to her new owner. Captain Kane said something to her in their native language. Harsh, guttural sounds that made Thaxton's translator struggle. The female nodded once, her posture shifting from defiant prisoner to something else entirely. Professional curiosity demanded that Thaxton follow them. As the highest-ranking military observer at today's auction, it was his duty to investigate potential security threats. At least, that's what he told himself as he activated his personal cloaking device and slipped out of the viewing pod. The corridors beneath the auction house were designed for discretion. Buyers could collect their purchases without dealing with protesters, competitors, or nosy officials. Thaxton followed Kane and his acquisition through a maze of service tunnels, his enhanced hearing picking up fragments of their conversation. "Told you to stay with the ship," Kane was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Marcus. They had her for 3 days," the female replied, her accent thick but understandable. 3 days in processing. You know what that means." They stopped at a security checkpoint where Kane presented his credentials to a bored-looking Zelthran guard. The guard's scanner beeped, accepted whatever codes Kane was broadcasting, and waved them through without question. Impressive. Either Kane had genuine credentials, or he was running some seriously high-grade forgeries. "Sarah, you were supposed to wait for extraction," Kane continued as they walked. The mission parameters were clear. "The mission parameters went to hell when they took her," Sarah shot back. "Lisa is my sister, Marcus. I wasn't leaving without her." Sister. That explained the resemblance Thaxton hadn't noticed before. Both females had the same bone structure, the same defiant tilt to their chins, the same eyes that promised violence to anyone stupid enough to underestimate them. They reached the loading dock where several ships sat waiting for their owners. Kane headed for a mid-sized cargo hauler that looked like it had seen better decades. The hull was scarred from micrometeorite impacts. The engines showed signs of recent repairs, and the registration numbers had been painted over so many times the original digits were completely obscured. But the weapons systems, Thaxton's tactical implants, immediately flagged the disguised gun ports, the reinforced hull sections, the power signature that was far too strong for a legitimate cargo vessel. This wasn't a trader's ship. This was a warship masquerading as civilian transport. Kane palmed a security scanner and the cargo bay doors hissed open. 3 more humans emerged from the ship's interior, and Thaxton's threat assessment systems went haywire. All military, all armed, all moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. "Report," Kane ordered tersely. "Dock security is bought and paid for," one of the humans replied. A dark-skinned woman with sergeant's stripes tattooed on her neck. "We have got maybe 10 minutes before someone notices the discrepancies in your ID." "More than enough time," Kane said. He turned to the female he'd just purchased. "Lisa, you are safe now, but we need to move fast. Are you injured? Can you travel?" Lisa straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "I can fight." Kane smiled then, and Thaxton felt his internal temperature drop several degrees. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of expression predators wore right before they reminded the universe why apex predators earned that title. "Good," Kane said softly, "because we are about to give these bastards a lesson in why you don't mess with human families." The loading dock's main lights went out. Emergency illumination flickered to life, bathing everything in hellish red light. Alarm klaxons began wailing, and Thaxton's communication implant crackled with frantic chatter from station security. "Unknown vessels approaching. Sir, we are reading multiple heat signatures. They are coming in fast. All defense platforms are offline. Repeat, all defense platforms are offline." Through the dock's observation windows, Thaxon could see ships materializing out of the darkness. Not one or two vessels, but dozens. Sleek, deadly shapes that moved with purpose and precision. They were broadcasting no identification codes, no diplomatic signals, nothing that would classify them as anything other than hostile forces. Kane activated a communication device and spoke into it calmly. Phoenix Lead. This is Retribution. Package secured. Light them up. The first explosion shook the entire station. Thaxon's military training kicked in. He needed to reach his command post, coordinate defensive actions, rally the station's security forces. But his feet seemed frozen to the deck plating as he watched the human family reunion unfold in the blood-red emergency lighting. Kane handed Lisa a weapon. Where had he been concealing that? And she checked it with the automatic motions of someone born to warfare. The other humans were already moving, their coordination perfect despite the chaos erupting around them. Sarah, take Lisa and get to the bridge, Kane ordered. Tommy, Jack, you are with me. We have some slaver scum to collect. What about station security? The sergeant asked. His smile turned absolutely predatory. What about them? Another explosion. This one close enough to rattle Thaxon's bones. Through his communication implant, he could hear the growing panic among the station's defenders. They are targeting the slave pens. Multiple breaches on levels 7 through 12. Sir, they are not just attacking random targets. They know exactly where everything is. Of course they did. Thaxon realized with growing horror that this wasn't a rescue mission. This was an intelligence operation that had been months, maybe years in the planning. The humans hadn't just stumbled across their enslaved kin. They'd been watching, learning, preparing. Kane and his team disappeared into the station's interior, leaving Thaxon alone with a revelation that made his combat implants scream warnings. The humans weren't defeated. They weren't broken. They were angry, and they'd been planning their revenge. The communication chatter in his head was becoming increasingly frantic. All defensive positions have been compromised. They are using our own security codes. How do they know our patrol routes? Sir, they are not taking prisoners. Thaxon forced his paralyzed limbs to move and headed for the command center. As the station's senior military advisor, it was his responsibility to coordinate the defense. But deep in his gut, beneath the layers of training and tactical protocol, a primitive voice was whispering the truth he didn't want to acknowledge. They weren't defending anything. They were already dead. The humans had just been polite enough to let them die with the illusion of fighting back. The lights went out again, and this time they didn't come back on. Thaxon's command center had transformed into a madhouse of flashing displays and screaming subordinates. Emergency lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows while his tactical officers shouted reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. Section 9 is completely dark. No response from security teams. Sir, they have breached the detention levels. All communication with the outer defense platforms has been severed. Thaxon slammed his clawed fist onto the central command console, sending sparks flying from abused circuitry. 3 cycles of military service had taught him to recognize the signs of a perfectly executed assault. This wasn't random violence or desperate rescue attempt. This was surgical warfare conducted by professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. Give me a tactical overview, he snarled at his communications officer, a nervous Corvani whose scales had turned pale with fear. Sir, we count at least 40 hostile vessels in 3 attack formations. They are using advanced stealth technology and broadcasting false identification codes. Initial strikes targeted power distribution, communications arrays, and defense platforms. Current estimates suggest they achieved 97% mission effectiveness in the first wave. 97%. Thaxon's stomach twisted into knots. Professional military forces celebrated 80% effectiveness rates. These humans were operating at a level that defied everything he'd been taught about their capabilities. His personal communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission. The caller ID showed Admiral Korath, Supreme Commander of the Zelthran Third Fleet and Thaxon's direct superior. Answering this call would be like volunteering for a plasma execution, but ignoring it would be worse, Admiral Thaxon said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Commander, I'm receiving reports of a major security incident at Station Omega-7. Please tell me you have the situation under control. Korvac's voice carried the kind of calm that preceded volcanic eruptions. Sir, we are dealing with a coordinated human assault on the station. Enemy forces have achieved significant tactical advantages, but we are mounting an effective defense. The lies tasted like acid on his forked tongue. Human assault? Korvac's laugh was like breaking glass. Commander, humans are primitive savages who barely qualified for Grade 7 threat classification. Are you telling me that a species we conquered in less than 6 months is now conducting military operations against Galactic Alliance facilities? Before Thaxon could formulate a response that wouldn't end his career, the command center's main view screen flickered to life. The image showed a human male standing in what appeared to be the station's central processing facility. Behind him, Thaxon could see open slave pens and freed prisoners of multiple species streaming toward evacuation points. The human was older than Kane, with gray streaking his dark hair and scars decorating his weathered face. His uniform was simple black fabric with no visible rank insignia, but he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute command. "Attention, Galactic Alliance personnel," the human said, his voice carrying clearly through the station's communication systems. "I am Colonel David Mason of the Terran Liberation Fleet. Your facility has been secured, your defensive capabilities neutralized, and your prisoner population liberated. You have 2 choices." Thaxon's tactical display showed that the transmission was being broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every ship and station within 3 light minutes. Whatever message this Colonel Mason intended to send, he wanted the entire sector to hear it. "Choice 1, Mason continued, his tone conversational despite the circumstances. "Surrender immediately. Order all remaining security forces to stand down. Allow us to complete our humanitarian mission without further bloodshed. Those who comply will be treated according to standard military protocols." Admiral Korath's voice crackled through Thaxon's communicator. "Commander, are you seeing this transmission?" "Yes, sir. And you are going to tell me that humans have somehow acquired a liberation fleet? That these primitives have developed military doctrine sophisticated enough to penetrate Alliance defenses?" On the view screen, Colonel Mason smiled. It was a patient, almost grandfatherly expression that somehow made Thaxon's combat implants scream danger warnings. "Choice 2, Mason said, his voice never losing its conversational tone. "Resist. Continue fighting. Force us to demonstrate why humanity survived long enough to develop interstellar travel despite living on a death world that tried to kill us every single day for 3 million years." The transmission cut to tactical footage that made Thaxon's blood freeze. Human assault teams were moving through the station with mechanical precision, their weapons technology clearly superior to anything the Alliance had deployed against Terra. But it wasn't the hardware that terrified him, it was the way they moved. Humans fought like pack predators. They communicated through subtle gestures and micro-expressions, coordinated their attacks with instinctive timing, and adapted to changing circumstances faster than his tactical computer could process new data. Watching them work was like observing some kind of deadly ballet performed by creatures specifically evolved for warfare. "Sir," one of his junior officers called out, her voice tight with panic, "we are receiving surrender requests from security teams throughout the station. They are saying the humans are offering quarter to anyone who lays down weapons." "Belay those requests," Thaxon snapped. "All units are to maintain defensive positions and engage hostiles on sight." But even as he gave the order, Thaxon could see his tactical display updating with new status reports. Red indicators showing neutralized defensive positions. Yellow markers indicating security teams that had gone silent. Green dots representing freed prisoners making their way toward human evacuation points. The humans weren't just winning. They were dismantling 3 cycles worth of defensive preparations like it was a training exercise. Admiral Korath's transmission crackled back to life. "Commander, I'm dispatching the battlecruiser Vengeance and 2 destroyer escorts to your position. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours. Hold your position until reinforcements arrive." 4 hours. Thaxon looked at his tactical display and calculated that the station would be completely secured within 30 minutes at current loss rates. But he couldn't tell Admiral Korath that the situation was hopeless. Not if he wanted to live long enough to see those reinforcements arrive. Understood, sir. We will maintain position. The command center's blast doors suddenly exploded inward, sending chunks of reinforced metal spinning across the room. Through the smoke and debris stepped Captain Marcus Kane, flanked by the two women Thaxton had seen at the slave auction. All three humans were armed with weapons that looked like they'd been forged in hell and blessed by demons. Kane's eyes found Thaxton immediately, and his smile was razor-sharp. "Commander Thaxton, I presume? We need to talk." Thaxton's subordinates were scrambling for their sidearms, but Kane made a subtle gesture, and Sarah raised her weapon. The energy pulse that followed vaporized 3 control consoles and sent everyone diving for cover. "I said we need to talk," Kane repeated, his voice perfectly calm despite the chaos. "Not fight, talk, there's a difference." Lisa moved to the communications station and began interfacing with the controls using some kind of portable device. Within seconds, she'd accessed the station's central database and was downloading files at impossible speeds. "Commander," Kane continued, settling into a chair with the casual ease of someone visiting old friends, "you have got 2 problems. First, your Admiral Korath is about to send a battle group into what he thinks is a minor security incident. Second, those reinforcements are going to arrive expecting to find a slave processing facility, not a fully operational human military base." Thaxton's mind reeled. "Military base?" Sarah laughed, and the sound was like breaking titanium. "Did you really think we'd spend 3 cycles sitting on our hands after you conquered Terra? We have been building, planning, preparing. Every human you thought you'd enslaved or killed has been working toward this moment." Kane stood and walked to the main tactical display, his movements casual despite the dozen weapons trained on him. "You see, Commander, your people made a critical error in judgment. You assumed that because we were technologically inferior, we were inherently inferior. You forgot that technology is just tools, and tools can be acquired." Lisa looked up from the communication station. "Download complete. We have their entire database, including fleet deployment schedules, defensive protocols, and command codes." "Excellent," Kane said. He turned back to Thaxton with that predatory smile. "Commander, I'm going to give you an opportunity that your admiral won't get. Surrender now, and you will live to see tomorrow. Refuse, and well, let's just say that humanity has some creative ideas about justice." Thaxton's hand hovered over his sidearm, but something in Kane's expression made him hesitate. This wasn't desperation or bravado. This was confidence backed by overwhelming force. "What do you want?" Thaxton asked. "Information," Kane replied simply. "Ship movements, fleet dispositions, command structures, everything you know about Alliance military operations in this sector." "I can't betray my oath," Thaxton said, though his voice lacked conviction. Sarah stepped forward, her weapon trained on his chest. "Your oath to what? The organization that turns sentient beings into property? The government that authorizes genocide as economic policy? The military that orders the enslavement of entire species?" Kane held up a hand and Sarah stepped back. "Commander, let me explain something about human psychology. We are a species that forms emotional bonds with everything. Our families, our communities, our pets, our concepts of justice. When you attack those bonds, you don't break us, you forge us into weapons." The tactical display updated with new information that made Thaxton's heart sink. More human ships were arriving, their formation patterns indicating this was just the first wave of a much larger operation. "Every human you enslaved had family," Kane continued conversationally. "Parents, siblings, children, friends. Every time one of us died in your processing facilities, others learned about it. Every time one of us was sold in your auctions, the information was recorded and transmitted. For 3 cycles, we have been cataloging every crime, every atrocity, every act of casual cruelty." Lisa finished her work at the communications station and rejoined her companions. Revenge lists compiled and cross-referenced. "We know who bought whom, where they went, and what happened to them." Kane's smile turned absolutely feral. "Commander, we are not here to rescue a few prisoners. We are here to collect a debt. Every human life you have stolen, Every family you have destroyed, every child you have sold to perverts and sadists. The bill is now due. The command center's emergency lighting flickered, and Thaxon realized that the humans had gained complete control of the station's power systems. They weren't just occupying critical areas, they owned the entire facility. "Admiral Korath," Thaxon said into his communicator, his voice barely steady. "Sir, I need to update my assessment of the situation." "Proceed, Commander." Kane gestured toward the communicator, and Sarah produced a small device that she connected to Thaxon's communication system. Whatever she'd done, Thaxon knew the humans were now monitoring all transmissions. "Sir," Thaxon said carefully, "the human assault force is significantly larger and better equipped than initial reports suggested. I recommend requesting additional reinforcements before engaging." "Additional reinforcements." Korvat's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Commander, exactly how many humans are we dealing with?" Kane leaned close to Thaxon's ear and whispered something that made the Zelthran commander's blood turn to ice water. "Sir," Thaxon said, his voice cracking, "preliminary estimates suggest we are facing the entire human species." Silence stretched across the communication channel like a death shroud. When Admiral Korath finally responded, his voice was barely controlled fury. "That's impossible, Commander. Humans are extinct. We sterilized their homeworld 3 cycles ago." Kane smiled and activated the main view screen. The image showed Terra as it appeared now, green, blue, and very much alive. Cities sparkled on the night side. Orbital facilities surrounded the planet like a string of pearls, and massive shipyards were clearly visible in high orbit. Admiral Kane said, speaking directly into the communication system, "I think it's time we had a proper conversation." Admiral Korath's image materialized on the main view screen, his reptilian features twisted with rage and disbelief. The Zelthran's scales had shifted to deep crimson, indicating either extreme anger or impending cardiac arrest. Thaxon wasn't sure which would be preferable. "Impossible," Korath hissed, his forked tongue flicking between razor-sharp teeth. "The Terra system was glassed. I personally supervised the bombardment. Nothing survived." Kane stepped into view of the communication array, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to the Admiral's fury. "Admiral Korath, your reputation precedes you. 3 cycles ago, you ordered the orbital bombardment of our major population centers, killed approximately 8 billion innocent civilians in the span of 6 hours. They resisted pacification," Korvax snapped. "Standard protocol for rebellious species." "Standard protocol," Kane repeated, his voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded hurricanes. "Tell me, Admiral, do you remember the names of the cities you destroyed? The schools? The hospitals? The refugee camps?" Korvac's scales darkened further. "I don't waste memory on inferior species." Sarah stepped forward, her weapon still trained on Thaxon's command crew. "New York, London, Tokyo, Delhi, Lagos, São Paulo." "Should I continue, Admiral? Because I have the complete list. 8,473,216,842 people. We counted every single one." The precision of that number hit Thaxon like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just survived their world's destruction. They'd catalogued it, memorialized it, turned it into fuel for something far more dangerous than simple revenge. Kane activated a portable holographic projector, filling the command center with tactical displays that made Thaxon's most classified intelligence look like children's drawings. Fleet positions, defensive installations, troop movements, supply lines. The humans had mapped the entire Galactic Alliance military structure with terrifying accuracy. "You see," Admiral Kane continued conversationally, "you made a critical error in your bombardment strategy. You targeted cities, industrial centers, population hubs, all the obvious places. But humans are remarkably good at hiding. We have had practice." The holographic display shifted, showing a cross-section of Terra's crust. Thaxon's tactical implants immediately identified the network of underground facilities that honeycombed the planet's interior, massive complexes that would have required decades to construct, all hidden beneath the surface while the Alliance believed they'd conquered empty rock. 43 years, Kane said, apparently reading Thaxon's expression. That's how long it took us to dig out our new civilization. 43 years of living like moles, building in secret, preparing for the day we could return to the surface, where bombardment bought us time to prepare properly. Admiral Koret's image flickered, as his communication system struggled with some kind of interference. You are bluffing. A species that barely achieved faster than light travel cannot possibly threaten the Galactic Alliance. Lisa laughed from her position at the communication console, and the sound carried enough menace to make several of Thaxon's officers reach for their weapons. Admiral, you are about to receive a tactical demonstration. Please observe your long-range sensors. The view screen split, showing both Korat's increasingly pale features and a tactical overview of local space. Red dots began appearing on the sensor grid, dozens at first, then hundreds, then thousands. Each dot represented a human warship materializing out of supposedly empty void. Stealth technology, Kane explained helpfully. Borrowed from the Corvani, improved with Altarian shield generators. Enhanced using Zelthran power systems. Amazing what you can accomplish when you combine the best technologies from multiple species with human ingenuity and a 3-cycle deadline. Thaxon's personal tactical computer was screaming warnings as it tried to process the sheer scale of the human fleet. Conservative estimates suggested over 2,000 combat vessels, ranging from fast attack craft to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Alliance Navy. Where did you get the resources? Korvath demanded, his voice cracking with strain. The shipyard facilities. The raw material? Sarah grinned, and the expression was absolutely predatory. Every human you enslaved and sold became an intelligence asset. They learned where you kept your mining operations, your manufacturing centers, your supply depots. For 3 cycles, we have been liberating your infrastructure, one facility at a time. Kane gestured toward the tactical display, highlighting a series of dates and locations. The Corvani mining disaster at Proxima 7, that was us. The mysterious disappearance of the Altarian fleet at Beta Cygni, also us. The complete breakdown of your supply chain in the Outer Rim, definitely us. The scope of it was staggering. Thaxon realized he was looking at evidence of a secret war that had been raging for 3 cycles without the Alliance leadership even recognizing it was happening. Every unexplained accident, every mysterious equipment failure, every supply shortage that had been blamed on administrative incompetence, all of it had been systematic sabotage by a supposedly extinct species. Admiral Colonel Mason's voice crackled through the communication system as his image appeared alongside Korath's. I believe it's time to discuss terms. Terms? Korath's laugh was like breaking crystal. You dare to offer terms to the Galactic Alliance? We represent 14 star systems, 300 billion citizens, and the most powerful military force in known space. Mason's smile was gentle, almost paternal. Admiral, you represented those things, past tense. Observe. The tactical display updated with real-time intelligence that made Thaxon's stomach drop through the deck plating. Human fleets were simultaneously attacking Alliance installations throughout the sector. Shipyards, supply depots, military bases, communication relay, everything was happening at once. Coordinated across light years with precision that defied belief. How? Korath whispered, his earlier bluster evaporating like smoke. Quantum communication networks, Kane replied. Another technology we borrowed and improved. Every human ship, every cell, every operative is connected in real time. We don't fight as individual units, Admiral. We fight as a single organism with 2,000 combat appendages. Lisa looked up from her console with an expression of savage satisfaction. Admiral, your flagship Dominion just lost primary power. Your escort destroyers are reporting massive system failures. Your home fleet at Zelthran Prime is currently surrounded by approximately 400 human vessels that materialized inside your defensive perimeter. The blood drained from Korvath's features as he realized the full scope of the trap he'd walked into. This wasn't a rescue mission or even a military operation. This was an execution, carried out with the methodical precision of a species that had spent 3 cycles planning every detail. What do you want? Korv asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Colonel Mason leaned forward, his grandfatherly demeanor never wavering. Justice, Admiral, pure and simple. Every human life you have stolen, every family you have destroyed, every child you have sold into slavery. We want compensation. Credits? Resources? We can negotiate. Not that kind of compensation, Kane interrupted, his tone growing cold. Personal accountability. Individual responsibility. Every Alliance officer who participated in the enslavement program, every trader who bought human cargo, every facility that processed our people, we want them. Sarah activated a portable holographic display that filled the command center with images Thaxton wished he could forget. Alliance officers torturing prisoners, slave traders inspecting human children like livestock, Corvani buyers selecting humans for particularly degrading purposes. The documentation was exhaustive, methodical, and absolutely damning. We have been recording everything, Sarah said softly. Every crime, every atrocity, every act of casual cruelty. We know who participated, where they are, and what they have done. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Admiral, it's justice with interest. Thaxton found his voice, though it came out as barely a croak. What about those who weren't involved? Civilians? Non-combatants? Kane turned to him with something that might have been respect. Commander, despite your participation in today's events, you have treated prisoners according to military protocol. Your personnel record shows no involvement in the slave trade. You will be allowed to surrender with honor and return to your homeworld. And the others? Kane's expression hardened. The others will face trial. Human justice, administered by the families of their victims. Admiral Korath's image flickered as his communication systems began failing. You are talking about genocide, the systematic murder of billions of Alliance citizens. No, Colonel Mason said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. We are talking about justice. Genocide is what you did to us. What we are offering is trials, evidence, and proportional punishment. The difference is important. The tactical display updated again, showing Alliance fleets throughout the sector, either surrendering or being systematically destroyed. The human war machine was operating with mechanical efficiency, offering quarter to those who yielded and annihilation to those who resisted. Kane walked over to Thaxton's command chair and settled into it with casual familiarity. Commander, you have a choice to make. Order your remaining forces to stand down and this station becomes a prisoner processing center. Refuse, and it becomes a tomb. The choice is entirely yours. Thaxton looked around the command center at his subordinates, seeing his own fear reflected in their eyes. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were prey animals cornered by apex predators who had spent 3 cycles planning this moment. All Alliance forces, Thaxton said into his communicator, his voice steady despite the circumstances. This is Commander Thaxton. Stand down. Surrender to human forces immediately. This is not a request. This is a direct order. Kane smiled and activated the station's general communication system. Attention all personnel, this is Captain Marcus Kane of the Terran Liberation Fleet. Station Omega-7 is now under human control. Surrender immediately and you will be treated according to the Terran Convention on Prisoners of War. Resist and you will be treated according to the Terran Convention on Justice. The difference between those two options was clear in Kane's tone. One offered life. The other offered something considerably less pleasant. Admiral Korath's image flickered one final time before cutting out entirely, leaving the command center in relative quiet. The only sounds were the hum of life support systems and the distant echoes of surrender announcements throughout the station. What happens now? Thaxton asked quietly. Kane stood and walked to the main view screen, which now showed the liberated Terra system in all its restored glory. Cities sparkled on the planet's surface, orbital facilities gleamed in the sunlight, and massive shipyards continued churning out vessels to add to humanity's growing fleet. Now? Kane smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely warm. Now we go home. All of us. Every human who was taken. Every family that was separated. Every child who was stolen. They all get to go home. Sarah moved to stand beside him, her sister Lisa joining them at the view screen. And the Alliance? Kane's expression grew thoughtful. The Galactic Alliance, as it existed, is finished. What comes next depends on how quickly they learn the difference between strength and cruelty, between civilization and barbarism. Colonel Mason's voice crackled through the communication system one final time. To all Alliance personnel monitoring this transmission, humanity extends an offer of coexistence. Abandon the slave trade, respect the rights of sentient beings, and we can build something better together. Choose to continue your current path. The transmission ended, leaving the implications hanging in the recycled air like a sword over everyone's head. Thaxton looked around the command center that had been his responsibility just hours ago, now under complete human control. The species he'd dismissed as primitive savages had just demonstrated a level of strategic thinking, technological advancement, and sheer ruthless efficiency that put the entire Galactic Alliance to shame. And somewhere in the back of his military mind, Thaxton realized he was witnessing the birth of something entirely new. Not just human revenge, but human justice. Not just the end of the Alliance, but the beginning of whatever came after. Outside the viewports, human ships continued arriving in formations that spoke of careful planning and unlimited resources. Each vessel carried the hopes and fury of a species that had been written off as extinct, only to return with interest on every debt the galaxy owed them. The wild alien girl who nobody had dared bid for was going home. And she was bringing an entire civilization with her. The age of human slavery was over. The age of human reckoning had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same again.